They say many, many times for me to speak in English about Agnon is a little bit embarrassing because such a genius deserve a better speaker, and certainly because Agnon appreciated every letter, every word, as we are going to see. I would say the words of that the Chazan said in the Tefillah of Musaf, "Ineni ani mimas nirash v'nifrad." I'm trembled before I come to speak about Agnon. The reason I agreed to speak about it, although English is not my native language, is it said in the Talmud, when you say something in behalf of the person who said it, so you already quote someone, you should see in front of you the person who said it. Even if he passed away a long time ago, try to imagine him. I guess that our sages try to tell us, be responsible, because if the person would be here, would he agree with what you say, or maybe disagree? So take it into account. And I feel a little bit better to speak in English because I think that if Agnon would be here, about many things that I try to explain, you say, I disagree, which is okay. But English was not the language of Agnon too. So I have no problem to speak in my English. Many people try to convince him to give the lecture in the Nobel ceremony in English, and he completely refused. He wanted to say it in Hebrew because he writes in Hebrew, but people said, the world should know something about your literature. And he completely refused. He did not feel comfortable to speak in English, and he didn't. Second challenge.
Can you please use the loudspeaker? It's not coming.
Sorry about that. Oh. Now. Thank you. They said many, many times, when you play music, you have the melody and you have the chords. To deal with the translation of Agnon, I feel many, many times that the maximum I can reach is a melody. Like this hand is completely it's not functioning, useless. And even with this hand, I'm not a great pianist, so it's not going to be sometimes maybe understood if you are not going to ask questions. So unlike the people who heard me before, please ask me questions. Every time that you feel that I skipped a concept or you don't understand exactly what I'm talking about, don't hesitate. I'm not going to be embarrassed. I know it in advance that something that I'm going to say maybe will not be fully understood. Raise your hand and we will have more kind of discussion. The third challenge I had was that basically we covered many concepts in the Hebrew lectures. And even for Agnon, you see, he wrote dozens of books because apparently after he wrote one, he needed to talk about other concepts. And many, many times he repeated himself. So to me, to take another 3 lectures about the previous concept is going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And nevertheless, I try to find things that we did not discuss in the first 6 lectures. But obviously, sometimes we are going to have an overlap. So please understand. Okay. How many people did not hear my first lectures? Okay, so let's just talk about the time frame of this book. Agnon arrived to his city, Bochach, which is called here Shibush, which is play on the Hebrew words of Bochach and Shibush, the Tzadik and the Shin. He arrives on Erev Yom Kippur. The first thing he does when he comes to town is to put his stuff and to go to shul to daven the tefillah of Yom Kippur. He leave town in a very meaningful day, especially for Agnon, Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, as we mentioned many times, Agnon claimed that he was born on Tisha B'Av. We know that it's not true. Agnon was born on Yudchet Av, and some people say Tetvav Av, but certainly not on Tisha B'Av. But for a person like him, Agnon always tried to round, I would say, to the closest number or to the something meaningful, and he decided that he was born a week earlier. Most people would like to be maybe younger, but he decided he didn't care to be born on Tisha B'Av. This by itself means that Agnon saw himself as a person who was born in a very meaningful day. Why? Because on one hand, the day of Tisha B'Av is the day of mourning. It's a day that is marking the destruction, the Churban of the Jewish people. However, Chachamim are telling us that the Churban, the destruction, is the first step of renewal. And Chachamim, in their beautiful ideas, they say that the Messiah was born also in Tisha B'Av. What does that mean? That the Jewish people always keep a hope. Destruction is temporary. Hope is eternal. And Agnon saw himself as the person who tells the story of destruction by bringing this beautiful hope for the renewal of the Jewish people. And everyone who read this beautiful book of Oreach Nata Lalun knows exactly what I'm talking about. On one hand, it's a very depressing book, talking about the destruction of Galicia, of his hometown, Puchach, or Shibush as they call it here. And at the same time, Agnon is telling us that something new is born, which we are going to discuss in the coming lectures. However, the first chapter, when he comes to his town, start with the name is Bati Le'iri. I came to my town. Now, for us, it's just a title. I came to my town. How they translate it in English here? Do you have the translation to English? I just wonder. I did not read the translation to English, but the Hebrew words are Bati Le'iri. Now, here is something very interesting. You know, every symphony, sometimes they have 3 parts or 4 parts. Each one is characterized differently by the tempo, if it's allegro, if it's going slower, and the composer always gives us instruction how he would like his symphony to be played. Bati Legani is actually something very joyous, because it builds on 2 words that are taken, which are taken from Shir HaShirim, the most beautiful love song that the Jewish people had. In Shir HaShirim, which King Solomon wrote as a love song, the expression Bati Legani Achoti Kala, I came to my garden, my beloved wife, appears few times. It's expression of joy of coming to the house of the Kala, which maybe is not married yet, but you know, like when you were young, you really like to come and to unite. And Bati Le'iri is using the same structure of Bati Legani. I came to my garden, I came to my city. Obviously, a person after many years, and in reality, Agnon was not in this city for 20 years. He came back, which, by the way, it's not only in the story. He indeed came back to Bochach after 21 years that he never visited the city, with great expectation. This is a place where he grew up as a child, and he wanted to see the city again. So this perek starts with a very joyous note. Bati Legani, Bati Le'iri. I came to be reunited with my city, the city that he had in his mind. But the name of the book is very, very different. Oreach Nata Lalun, a guest for the night. And this is part of a verse from the book of Jeremiah. In the 14th chapter of Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah is talking about a husband who left his wife. And he's not living with her anymore. He is Oreach Nata Lalun. He is a guest in other places. He's going from one place to another, but he left his house. He's a guest. He's Oreach. And Yirmiyahu, in Perek Yudaled, is asking Hashem, Lama tiye kehish nidham? Why are you behaving like a person who is paralyzed, who cannot do anything? Oreach Nata Lalun. Like a person who doesn't care about the place that he visits. Why Yirmiyahu say that? Because Yirmiyahu lived in a time before destruction, and Yirmiyahu predicted the destruction 1-to-1. He knew when he saw Yerushalayim that Yerushalayim maybe exists in a physical shape. You can see the buildings, the palaces, you can see the kingdom, you can see many things. But it's not going to last. It's going to be destroyed. And by titling this book, Oreach Nata Lalun, taken from Yirmiyahu, Agnon is doing two things. Number one, for him, Buchach is just an optical illusion. It does not exist anymore. Clearly, it's going to be destroyed. Number two, he raises a major question. This was much of the discussion that we had in Hebrew. What happened to God? What happened? How is it possible that you can see Shibush, this city, and to still believe in God who allowed all this to happen? All this to happen means that people lost their life, their families, their parnasah, their livelihood, their town, their religiosity, everything. And the same question that Yirmiyahu is asking Hashem, how can you stand on the sideline and not doing anything? Agnon is asking about 2,000 years later, God, how is that possible? The story is about a visit that taking place after the First World War, when what Agnon is seeing is something very, very different from what he expected or had in mind. And therefore, what we have here is a new Megillat Eicha. Eicha was written by Yirmiyahu himself, Jeremiah, after the destruction that he predicted so well. And his first question is, Eicha yashva badad ha'ir rabat yam. And we have it here, oh, how has a city that was once so populous remained lonely? So in many generations, this question was asked. It was asked by Yirmiyahu about Yerushalayim. It is asked now by Agnon about the Jewish communities of Galicia. He remembered them exactly as Jeremiah remembered Yerushalayim, and I'm going to talk about who was Jeremiah in a second. And Agnon sees the same sight, and therefore you just missed maybe the word Eicha, but everything else is exactly the Kina that we read on Tisha B'Av, by the way, of Yirmiyahu about Yerushalayim. Jeremiah was the son of Kohen Gadol. He knew he belonged to one of the prominent family in Anatot, a city next to Yerushalayim. In a way, It might remind us Buchach, which was not a capital, was not a major city, but close enough to some other cities to know what is happening in the big cities. People went to the fairs to visit relatives, and they knew very well what happened in the bigger cities of Galicia. He was the son of a Kohen Gadol, Yirmiyahu ben Chilkiyahu, was a Kohen Gadol. He spent lots of his time in Yerushalayim, so he was aware very much of the political ties that happened in Yerushalayim, and he saw in his eyes why Yerushalayim is going to be destructed in a short time. Because the destruction is not just ruining the buildings. First of all, in every destruction is the destruction of society, which lead later to physical destruction. And Yirmiyahu saw all this. If you want to know more about it, read the book of Yirmiyahu. Number one, it will remind you many, many things that are happening today in terms of our social structures, the way people don't pay enough attention to moral life. And, you know, we can learn sometimes from our mistakes, although Churchill once said that the only thing we learn from history is that we don't learn anything from history. Sometimes it's good to read about history and about Jewish history because it's amazing how we repeat our mistakes again and again, but this is not the topic that I want to talk about. I would like to talk about what Agnon see when he comes to town. A beautiful sight that Agnon starts in the first page is Be'er HaMelech, the well of the king. You know that the Jews of Poland lived there for hundreds of years, anything between 600 years to 1,000 years. If you visited the beautiful museum in Warsaw, excellent museum, really like going over the life and unfortunately the destruction of the Poland Jewry. And life in Poland once were very good. Actually, people ran away from many countries that suffered pogroms and all kind of torturous history. If it was Spain, if it was Turkey, if it was other countries, they arrived to Poland and enjoyed prosperous life. One of the places was Be'er HaMelech. There was one king, Polish king, Sovietsky, I think was his name, and he visited the city, and for the Jews it was such a unique moment that they called the well where he stopped and drank from the water Be'er HaMelech. When Agnon comes back to town on Erev Yom Kippurim, he described the well as a place of desolation. The water are going free, but no one collects them. The people who used to gather around it are not there anymore because the well used to be a place where the shkatzim and the shkatzot, the shiktzes, the boys, the girls used to come around. They are not there anymore. And next to the well, there are reddish, crimson grass. And he described it like grass that the angel of death, Malach HaMavet, rub his sword against it. So the blood on his sword stained this grass around the well. By the way, this idea of the angel of death and his sword appears at least 4 or 5 times that I managed to count in this book, and it goes over the book like the angel of death in a way is hovering over Buchach. What I would like to take is few quotes here, and I would appreciate if someone can help me reading in English. So let's start with the beginning. Then the war came, and I just want you to see how beautifully Agnon talk about the war like a person, not like a noun, a concept. It talks like a person who came to Buchach and he's taking away the life of the people inside. So who would like to volunteer, please?
Then the war came.
Thank you.
Took away way his sons sent his wife out of her mind and destroyed his house. The Jews of Sibush are more dead than alive, and they have no strength at all. First came the war and uprooted them, and they did not take root anywhere else. Then their chattels were taken. Then their money was taken. Then their children were taken. Then their homes were taken. Then their livelihoods were taken. And then they were given taxes and levies.
By the way, the number of that are mentioned here, sometimes are taken from the new edition of Agnon. Some of them belongs to the old one. I'm sorry for the confusion. If you try to follow it, it will be nice if I will be able to get like the English translation, and then I will tell you exactly where to find it in the book itself. But what is the explanation? What indeed happened? I think it's very, very important, since Agnon referring us to Eicha, to Yirmiyahu, it's interesting to know why Yirmiyahu, or what was the explanation of Yirmiyahu, the Navi Yirmiyahu, to the destruction of Yerushalayim. And it's only one explanation. Yes, please.
Can you translate the word
Jeremiah, the prophet. Yeah, Jeremiah, okay? I hope that we are okay about it. Thank you. So, please read in English the words of Jeremiah. Eicha yashva badad. You know, by the way, it's very interesting that Jeremiah, he wrote his lament, his kina of Eicha. All the prakim except of the last one are alphabetical. So here we have the first pasuk start with Aleph Eicha, pasuk Chet, Chet Chata Yerushalayim, Yud Chet is corresponding with the Ot Tzadik. So that just the beauty of this kina, a lament of Yirmiyahu, was a different discussion. You know, Tisha B'Av is coming, or unless Mashiach will come before. It's interesting maybe to learn this beautiful, beautiful sefer of Eicha, which is written in unbelievable way. I'm not talking even about the content, just the way he wrote it is mind-boggling. So who wants to read the English translation? Oh, how? Yes, please. Thank you.
Oh, how has the city that was once so populous remained lonely? She has become like a widow. She that was great among the nations, a princess among the provinces, has become tributary.
Now, Yirmiyahu in the next pasuk will explain why it happened. Eicha, here is the answer. Yes, Eicha means like, how is it possible? I will tell you how. Yes. The next pasuk, please. Jerusalem.
Jerusalem sinned grievously. Therefore she became a wanderer. All who honored her despised her, for they have seen her shame. Moreover, she herself sighed and turned away.
This is so beautiful. Please continue then to the next pasuk. Thank you. The Lord
is righteous, for I have rebelled against his word. Hear, I pray, all you peoples, and behold my pain. My maidens and my youth have gone into captivity.
Okay. So Yirmiyahu had a very simple answer. Why the destruction? Why not? It actually was well predicted by the Torah itself. Tzaddik Hashem. Hashem did nothing wrong. Kipiu mariti. It's all about my sins. I am responsible for that. Agnon, upon arrival to Bochach, has the same answer. If you read the first 15 chapters or the first 20 chapters, Agnon tried to convince the people in the shul that it's all because of us, because we did something very, very wrong, and therefore we worth the punishment of God. And this issue is going to be the big challenge of Oreach Nata Lalun. The same challenge that Yirmiyahu asked Hashem, How can you behave this way? Agnon is going to ask the same question. It's interesting that the word eicha, this shock, this belief, is not a new phenomenon. The Midrash say that there were three who actually asked this question, eicha, in different ways. So let's see the Midrash, the beauty of Chachamim, that they paid attention to the fact that we find the word eicha 3 times in the entire Bible. And then we will try to understand what is common to all this eicha. How is it possible? So please, someone from here, if you don't mind, please. There are 3. Please. Don't be shy, guys. We are learning together. It's like a class. Please.
There are
Thank you.
prophesied with the word Eicha. The first was Moses. Eicha es alavadi.
Torchachem
Umasa achem.
verivchem. So Moshe Rabbeinu, at a certain point, he can't take it anymore, and he complained against the people of Israel. I cannot take this responsibility anymore. You became like really Amksheoref. He realized that he is the leader of the Jewish people at a certain point. And therefore he complains, Eicha, it's impossible. I cannot understand how God gave me one person to deal with the entire nation. The second one is Yeshayahu. Yeah? Eicha ita lezona kirya ne'emana. מלאיתי משפט צדק ילין בה ואתה מרצחים. How has the faithful city become a harlot? It was full of justice, righteousness dwelled there, and now murderers. Yeshayahu saw the beauty of Yerushalayim. He lived in a time where Jerusalem was a strong city. He was in the time of Chizkiah, the grandeur Jerusalem after Shlomo and the kings after that. And he saw that Yerushalayim became a place that is far away from the concept of Yerushalayim. The word Eicha is seeing a situation like Moshe. They came to Har Sinai, they received the Torah that we had only yesterday, and over time you can see the decline. So Moshe is the first one to ask this devastating question, Eicha, how is it possible? Yeshayahu is the second one, and Yirmiyahu is the third one. The third prophet, Jeremiah, opened the book of Eicha with Eicha Yashva Badad Ha'ir Bat Yam. How does a city that was full of people sit desolate? What Agnon is doing, he asking the same question, because what he is going to tell us through the story, what Bochach was for so many years, and what happened to this city after the First World War. So let's go to page number 2, and this is the watershed point of maybe Jewish history. The answer of Yirmiyahu was everything done by Hashem. Everything is because of the sins of Bnei Israel. This approach of Yirmiyahu was the only approach to Jewish suffering for almost 2,000 years. I'll give you one example. 70 years ago, there was in Yerushalayim a great rabbi who was before the rabbi of a very known city in Europe, Brisk. His name was Velvale from Brisk. And people came to him and said, we need a day to mark Tisha B'Av. How is it possible that we don't have a day to mark a national disaster like the Shoah? We like mourning over the Crusaders and over like minor issues, and we cannot find one day to remember the Holocaust. His answer was, the Holocaust in term of, and by the way, he lost 6 of his children in the Holocaust itself, 4 or 6, I can't remember, but at least 4, and his entire family. He said, yes, Obviously, this was the greatest disaster, but it's going in one line from the disaster that started thousands of years ago. And to mark all these disasters that started with the destruction of the temple, we have Tisha B'Av, and everything that unfolded in Jewish history since is under the title of Tisha B'Av. We don't need another day. That's why the sages said that Tisha B'Av is the day of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, and along the way we know that in Tisha B'Av they started the expulsion from Spain, and actually 70 years ago the Germans entered Poland on Tisha B'Av, or around Tisha B'Av. And he said basically it's all one issue of Jewish suffering. And already the Chachamim decided that we have one day. So there are many who say, well, you know, it's really terrible that the Jewish people are suffering so much. But since the destruction and the expulsion from Eretz Israel, this is the fate of the Jewish people. We don't like it, but we have to accept it. In 1903, there were the pogroms in Kishinev. Bialik, a close friend of Agnon for most of his life. There is a mystery what happened in a certain point of their life, but they were very, very close. Two great Torah scholars. I don't know if you know that Bialik, Agnon, I told you many, many times, one of the greatest Torah scholars. But Bialik was Ilui. He learned in the yeshiva of Volozhin. In the yeshiva of Volozhin, only few people could even get in, and it was not about the money. They had to be already in the age of 16. It's going like this. You got a free pass to Volozhin if in the age of 14 you finished the Babylonian Talmud. 2,800 pages, knowledge, Rashi, Tosfot, everything. In the age of, so if you came with a document proving that in the age of 14 you already know the Shas, you got your pass, free pass to Volozhin. I can tell you that even today there are very few people, not 14 years old, but 70 years old, who don't know the Talmud Bavli entirely. In the age of 16, sometimes they gave you a hard time to get into Volozhin. 16 was a little bit too late to know the entire Talmud Bavli. Bialik became a student in Volozhin in the age of 13. Right after his bar mitzvah, he tells the story, he was 1 week, and then his father said, don't waste your time. You should go to Volozhin in the age of 13. A little bit after his bar mitzvah, he went to Volozhin. Everyone loved him. First of all, he was a nice person and ilui, and you know in the yeshiva world, what they measure is only your intellect, your ability to understand a good question, to answer a good question, to compare two different pieces of Talmud. And they loved him. But in Volozhin, because it was a place where the greatest mind of the Jewish people actually were, few hundred young people, the Haskalah, the enlightenment, made its way to Volozhin, and this was a disaster. Because if sometimes you have one person here, one person there, well, one will be affected. Here, you took all the young minds of the Jewish people, and they were all together exposed to the plague of Haskalah, of enlightenment. And they started to read, obviously, other things. It was a time of nationalism and really great debates about many issues. And many people in Volozhin itself were actually leaving the Torah world, and some of them became great communists, socialists, Zionists. Every East in the world came to Volozhin. And Bialik was one of them. In 1903, he was sent by his newspaper to Kishinev. There was a terrible pogrom. Now, pogroms were not something new, unfortunately, in Russia, Ukraine, but the magnitude of this pogrom exceeded everything that you can imagine. And I would say something very, very important. because I don't think that people understand why the pogroms in Kishinev raised such awareness to the terrible situation of the Jewish people. You know, Jews killed is not a great chidush. What happened in Kishinev was an unbelievable phenomenon of raping the Jewish women. And the tragedy of losing the dignity apparently is much stronger than losing the life of a person. People could live and they knew there was tradition about people who died very young. This was known. But what happened in Kishinev was way beyond it. It was dehumanize the Jewish people, especially by raping the women and the young girls. And unfortunately, what happened was the reaction. You know, we cannot blame Chas v'Chalila, you know, after 120 years what happened in Kishinev. But people did not know how to deal with a catastrophe like this, which never happened before. I mean, we know that in like 400 years before, there were rumors, but here, with the newspapers and with the media that spread the news, husbands that were completely paralyzed when the goyim came in, and all kinds of sights. Obviously, I don't want to repeat, but what Bialik saw and others was the lowest point of the Jewish people ever, I guess. There is nothing worse than losing the dignity. Brenner wrote a terrible song about a husband who goes to the rabbi to ask if he can continue to live with his wife after she was raped. And I mean, people were in such a shock that there was disalignment between the laws of the Torah and the situation of the Jewish people. And Bialik, within 7 hours, wrote one of the greatest poems, Ira HaReiga. I saw today in the Cambridge University, they have a translation of the entire poem, crying about what happened in Kishinev. From this moment, something unbelievable happened. Many of the Jewish writers and thinkers could not expect the old paradigm of what happened is part of the fate of the Jewish people. They decided to rebel against this concept. They decided that at a certain point we cannot continue with this idea of Kiddush Hashem, sanctify the name of God, and we have to do something about ourselves. It's impossible to leave it, all the terrible suffering of the Jewish people, only as a concept of Kiddush Hashem, sanctify the name of God. We have to take action. And that's exactly what Ira HaReiga, by the way, this is about, I would say, less than 10% of the entire poem, what I wrote here. And I don't think that we will have enough time to read the poem, but this is a poem that changed everything about the modern Hebrew literature. Everyone from Bialik on had to raise his voice about this question. Are we going to continue with this tradition of Kiddush Hashem, or we are taking, knowingly, with full awareness, a completely different path for the Jewish continuation? And this, in a way, is the essence of Tzionut, as many people in Europe understood at the time. Yes?
This is very much in line with what you said last week about Herzl, 2 weeks ago, that Herzl's, one of the important things that we don't always recognize is that Herzl's position was that we are not going to be waiting for these things to happen to us anymore.
Right.
In a way that historically the Jewish people were perceived as being as such.
Absolutely. This was you have to understand, it was not just a cry for action, as it happened many, many times. It was a departure of a glacier from the history of the Jewish people. What are we saying on Yom Kippur? What are we saying on Tisha B'Av? We indeed say we have to accept the fate, mekablim et adin. And we just ask Hashem that one day He will redeem us from it. After the pogroms in Ukraine, there was a new way of thinking. And this book, Oreach Nata Lalun, is one voice in the choir that started to ask for a change. Each one came with a different idea. Some people wanted completely to departure from their Jewish past. Some people said, you see, it's all like a sheker v'chazav nachlu avotenu. Terrible things. Like Brenner. Brenner did not want to see a rabbi in his life. Eventually he was killed by the Arabs, but when he was invited by Rav Kook, he said, I cannot go. And again, he was another student, not of Volozhin, but a prominent yeshiva. He thought it's time to depart from everything from before. Agnon is torn. He's Agnon. Aguna is someone who is married to someone, but cannot live with him. Agnon saw himself as married to the Jewish tradition, to God. But he asked, where are you? And the interesting thing about this book, which we did not mention, Agnon writes this book when his wife is in Germany and he is in Galicia. This is very important because his own life represents, in a way, what happened to the Jewish people. The husband, God, and the wife are not together. This goes on few levels on this book. I'm sorry? Oh, absolutely, because he wants to bring what Agnon is doing in this novel. He is putting himself in a very unique situation, and I will say one more thing, which is very, very important. Agnon is also Oreach Nata Lalun. He's a guest in town. He comes for a very limited time. In reality, he was only 1 week, but he writes like he was 10 months. So he's also Oreach Nata Lalun. And in a way, he compares himself to God himself. God is the creator, and Agnon is also a creator. In a very different level, obviously. He was not a Magloman. But the act of creation is exactly the role of the writer of Oreach Nata Lalun. He creates something. In the beginning of the book, he tried to revive the old world of Bochach. At the end, he realized he cannot, and he goes to another solution that we are going to discuss in the third lesson. The creation of something new in Israel, in Yerushalayim. We are going to see it then. But I want to show you a very interesting thought of Agnon himself. And this is in page number 3. Agnon describes it very, very well because he's visiting the cemetery and he sees the tombstone. You know, if you want to know something about like Jewish history, you go to the cemetery. And you see generation, and what they wrote, and what they were dealing with. And Agnon is doing, he's going to the cemetery of Bochach a few times throughout the story. So if you see at the end of page number 3, the role of the narrator, paper is better even than a tombstone. For if the tombstone is a large and beautiful one, the Gentiles steal it and use it for their buildings, and if it is small, it sinks into the ground. Paper is a different matter. For if you print a book, it spreads all through the dispersions of Israel and lasts for generations. And by this, he explained us why it's so important for him to write this story. Story, words, a book will never disappear. So in a way, he creates something that, like God, will stay forever. And that's the importance of writing everything in that he sees. He knows that by words you can create, which is very similar to the old idea of Chachamim, that God created the world by words. Vayomer Elohim yehi or. God said there will be light, and the light became a reality. We, with words and ideas, we can also create worlds, and therefore Agnon, in a way, is playing the role of God in creation. I just want to show you one beautiful way. As I said, in English it's very, very hard, but I'll try to explain a beautiful concept and how Agnon play with his knowledge of Jewish sources to describe his visit to Shibush. And this is actually on page number 1, and this is in page 3 here, page 1 in the book. The narrator returns to his hometown by train on the eve of Yom Kippur. His station is announced by Raberovich. I mean, in the book it's called Gumovich. Gumovich? Shoshana, what's the name like in Gumovich? But it means gumi, the rubber. So basically in English, the best translation is Raberovitz. The man with the false arm who waving the flag in his hand called Shibush. So the first thing when he comes to his town on the train station, this person with a hand that was cut in the war is raising a flag and announce to everyone Shibush, which in Hebrew means an error. What you are going to see from now on is Shibush. Something went very, very wrong. You know, in Israel, when you say a bumpy road, it's derech meshubeshet. Derech meshubeshet means shibush is something which is bumpy and full of errors and is not convenient. So the name of the city is Shibush, because everything that you are going to see is going to be one big shibush. And that's what Agnon described in about half of the book.
They also use in Hebrew the word shibush for when something goes wrong in your mind.
Right.
Ishtabshadato,
right. Ishtabshadato means like he became farkalecht or something like this. Okay. But see how Agnon described it so beautifully. It was many years. This is like, until now it was just what he writes about. But now this is a translation of what he writes. It was, who wants to help me here? It was many years.
Since I heard the name of Shibush coming from the lips of a man of my town. Only he who was born there knows how to pronounce every single letter of that name.
Now,
the rabbi writes commentaries on the Torah. The rabbi's son writes about the love of the Torah. And the rabbi's grandson just writes about love.
Yeah, this is a nice quote, but I wanted actually the beginning. See what happened here. Only a person who was born in Shibush can pronounce the name correctly. Now, in Hebrew, it goes like this. He pronounced the name Shibush bechol otiotea, in every letter that the word Shibush is comprised of. Now, what is so beautiful here? This is a phrase that is taken from the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, it was one day in the year that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, had to pronounce the name of God, which according to tradition is 42 letters, much longer than Shibush, and he pronounced it once a year with every letter exactly as it appears. It was apparently an art to pronounce it properly. And Agnon compared the person in the train station to the Kohen Gadol who is also pronounced the name of Shibush, which is a sacred name, especially for Agnon, like the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim. And then he said he raised the flag. When did they do it in Yom Kippur in the temple? Not in Kodesh HaKodeshim, but when they send the scapegoat, they used to tell the people around, because not everyone could see every part of the service of the Kohen Gadol, they used to raise the flag in order to show, oh, we finished this part of the service. And then when the high priest went to another place and he finished the service, they used to flag to all the people who could not see it where they stand, that this service is over, we are going to the next step, because they had like 18 or 19 different steps, and which remind me sometimes like a golf course, you know, like 19 stations. You cannot, if you are staying in hole 1, you cannot see what happened in hole 17. So you have someone to tell you what happened. And Avdil Elef Alfei Avdalot, obviously, like there was 19 steps that the Kohen Gadol did on Yom Kippur, and they had to tell the people, okay, we finished this service, we are going to station number 16. Yes, Shoshana.
I just wanted you to translate Kohen Gadol, and you did.
Yeah, okay, the high priest, of course, yeah. Right. By the way, you know that the Christian, they took the name Magnum Papa. What is Magnum Papa? It's like the Kohen Gadol. They took the same, they think that they managed to copy it. And the Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol is the high priest. So again, this I just wanted to bring you an example why it's so hard to translate Agnon, and as I explained in one of my lectures, it's amazing that Agnon got the Nobel Award for seeing that people who are not fully immersed into the Jewish text, they also saw the depths and the unbelievable wisdom that he put into the text, although they really are not aware fully to the depths of the sources that Agnon is actually build his stories with. So this is just a comment that is important to make. I would like to leave some time for questions. This is the best time for it. Please. By the way, please let me know if you want that the next 2 lectures are going to be in a different direction. You want something, please. I have to learn the game from you, what you are interested in. I don't want to repeat myself from the Hebrew lectures. So please be open and let me know. Bakasha. Question.
I think that whatever you come up with, which will be new for us, to us, will be good.
I see, okay. Thank you.
His writing is similar to the Pardes. It's only levels within it.
It's very, very true. It's very true. Pardes in Hebrew means Perush, which means the pshat, the simple understanding. Remez, the hints. The Daled is drash, when you analyze and investigate, and the sod, the Kabbalah, and indeed, I would say that Agnon is even more than that, because the Pardes is a Tanaik. It's something that used to be learned in the time of the Tanaim, which is about 1800 years ago. Agnon, as I said many, many times, he was an expert in every layer of the Jewish literature. Mishnah, of course, the Bible, no question about, but then the Talmud, the Midrash, the Parshanut, the Gemara, the Rishonim, and then the Kabbalah, the Chassidut. It's just hard to believe how much one person really knew. His head contained much more than you can contain here in 64 giga or 128, and he made unbelievable connections in his books, which is something to admire. Absolutely.
Did he come? Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to know if the Orthodox study Agnon, like...
Today there is a huge revival of Agnon. Beit Agnon in Yerushalayim is very active. I mean, very active means much more active than it used to be. I remember only, actually after I started to teach Agnon, I decided to go and visit Beit Agnon, and it was quite sad. No one came there, no one visited the place. I talked to the lady that welcomed me to the house, and she said, unfortunately, very few people are coming. Today, Beit Agnon is almost every day they have something. And I took my grandchildren last summer to Sifriya Leumit in Yerushalayim, which is a beautiful place, by the way, to visit. And they had a day about Agnon for like children up to the age of 13, 14, and it was packed. I have to say, one regrettable thing, most of the people were there wear kippah, which I thought is such a hachmatza, because I expected Lirot to see every person. Maybe it was not well advertised, because really Agnon has to offer every Jew, no matter what, so much, and it's chaval that it is not exposed, but I think that there is a new movement. I would highly recommend you a new book that I just read 2 Shabbatot ago. I have to admit, in the middle of davening, but okay. Micha Goodman is a young thinker, and he writes very, very well. And he himself established a new midrasha in Prague that is teaching Jewish sources to people who are dati and lo dati, and apparently very, very successfully. And he wrote a new book, I cannot remember the name of the book, Ben Shnei Olamot, if I'm not mistaken, or something like this, describing what is happening today in the people of Israel. How the Chiloni crowd is not afraid as it used to be from the Dati. The Dati is not so afraid of the Chiloni, and there are many opportunities. Chiloni as the secular crowd, thank you. And how there is lots of things that start to, people start to work together. He claims, his idea is that actually what happened in Israel now is something which is more Israeli. I mean, everyone tried to leave the square where he grew and he labeled, and they tried to create something more Israeli, which might be true. And if it's true, I have no doubt that Agnon is going to be a superstar, because he's the one that indeed went through it. He obviously was the master of the Jewish treasure of all the generation, and at the same time, he appreciated very much the renewal in Israel. He had his doubts. We are going to speak about it. He was not sure. That's why he found himself in Germany. And but nevertheless, he knew that the future of the Jewish people is in Israel. And 70 years later, people start to see that apparently he was right. He was right.
Micha Goodman is with the Shalom Hartman Institute.
Nachon. He's today is a lecturer in Machon Hartman.
He
right.
has been here.
How can Israel,
Oh, I didn't know. I would come to hear him for sure.
how can Israel accommodate the Jews of the world? I mean, it's not realistic to think that Israel is so tiny. How can she accommodate?
It's a good question. Baruch Hashem, I'm not Netanyahu or any person in the government. You see, I don't know. But Chachamim actually were aware of it. They called Eretz Israel Eretz HaTzvi. They saw that the deer skin is very flexible. And they said when the Jews are going to come, it will become flexible. Now, it's really interesting. But the main problem that any settlement, any city needs is water. And today in Israel, it's unbelievable. Like they draw water from the sea. They manage to make sweet fresh water from the sea. So there will be solutions. You will see like towers raising like 50. Don't worry, there will be place for everyone.
It's not worried. It's realistic. Look at the size of Canada and the size of Israel. I mean, land.
Well,
We are great believers. You know, I'm pretty sure that a solution will be found. We, the Jewish people, believe in the unbelievable, right? That's our definition. Yes.
You kept referring to Chachamim, the word Chachamim.
Yeah, the sages, the Torah scholars, the Torah scholars. You know, we will have to find a solution to this one. Every time that you don't understand one of my words, please raise your hand, okay? It's really, I will not be offended by it, and I feel very bad if people just miss a word and therefore cannot make the context or the connection between sentences. Yes?
Do we know something about his own family, how they reacted, how they felt when he left as a young man?
It's a good question. Actually, remember, his father died very young. Unfortunately, he even described it in this book that he could not be there on his funeral. The only thing that he saw on the tombstone is a word that he wrote. It's an interesting question. I don't know. He wrote a book, Me'atzmi El Atzmi, which is a fascinating book. I read especially like his relationship with Bialik and Brenner, which I'm telling you, it's fascinating. It's just like, yeah. So I don't know. But remember that before 39, he managed to bring most of his family to then Palestine. One of them, I'm sorry?
Very close with his.
Right, but he managed to get them the certificates, you're right. But he managed to get them the certificates, and most of them came, his siblings, all of them came to Israel. Yeah, listen, he had no time for people. That's the sad part of it. I'm sorry?
No patience.
No patience and no time also. He was so busy. Listen, this book, you have to understand what's the story behind this book because it's very interesting. I think that we explained few stories from Ha'esh Ve'Haitzim, which is a collection for Yamim Noraim. He saw that it's going to be a reader for Yamim Noraim, and he wanted to go, as he called it, the pantheon of Jewish literature. He said something that people take to shul will be forever. Something that people just read at the book, you know, it has 100 years, 200 years. I think it was a mistake, but it was very important for him to write Ha'esh Ve'Haitzim, this beautiful collection. That I know that many people are taking to shul in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. When he finished it, his plan was to take like half a year, like semi-retirement. It was exhausting. He worked very, very hard to collect all the versions and to choose and to reorder and to, as we explained in two of his stories, actually to rebuild, to reconstruct the story. And then he heard what happened in Bochach, in his city, and he did not have even a day. He took the pen and started to write this book, which he finished in 139 days. Like he published in Haaretz, every single day he published one chapter, and when he finished it, the Second World War, the same day, or the day after, the Second World War started. And it's amazing how he predicted the destruction of Europe, of the Europe Jewry. Yes?
I just wanted to ask, if I'm not mistaken, one of the short stories of Agnon, that there's an existing recording of him reading it in his own voice, if I'm not mistaken, B'mi Yameha, Meita Laimi. I don't know if it's autobiographical in an untimely fashion. My mother passed away. I don't know if that's about his own mother.
I actually have a recording of a story that he tells his grandchildren before they went to sleep, which is quite amazing. How you read it? They fell asleep immediately, I guess. But I didn't know about this one. But you know, today, the day of the YouTube and the archives, if there is something like this, we will bring it. Yeah, thank you for letting me know. Okay, so we are going to meet next week. Bezrat Hashem, thank you very much for your listening. Again, apologies if I was not clear in certain words or ideas. Toda rabba ve'layla tov.